Welcome everyone to the Kendall Report. It is Wednesday night. We had quite the day on Wednesday. Huge reversal. I'll talk about that in the technicals. We got an outside reversal after making a new low. And a lot of times you'll see that pattern set up. You make a new low for the year and the market reverses. So we'll see if there's much to it. I'll go through the details here in just a few minutes. As everybody knows, and I agree with some comments that I saw in the chat before I came live, is if it wasn't for the BOE today, markets were in big trouble. Although we saw a pattern that I talked to you about last night. I said we've been opening higher and then going lower into the close. Said watch for inverse to happen. And I said maybe this is the beginning, because last night we were down about 30 handles when I was doing the broadcast, and we started low, ended up high in a big way. And certainly the BOE coming in and buying everything they could find was what it took to make that happen. I think I had an interesting thought. I realized that all this dislocations of capital is happening in Europe, but is it possible? I'm just going to throw this out here, so I give you folks and the trolls and everybody something to talk about. Is it possible that the BOE is a proxy for the Fed? I talked about this a number of weeks ago, is that all the central banks are going to be working together to manipulate the markets and stabilize them. So is this little pivot that we're seeing here, is that what we just saw was the BOE going from, I saw a really funny tweet today. The BOE said quantitative tightening dies 2022 to 2022. So it didn't last long, right? So if the BOE found all kinds of excuses to do this, what did we see? Overnight, we saw the 10-year print over 4%, and it finished at 370 today. Pretty big move. I was talking about these RXT sell signals we were getting and thought we'd go sideways. Well, looks like maybe we put some tops in, possibly on the Dow. There's still a pretty good bid in there. There's a lot of shortages of Dow, so it's a little different. But I thought it was the action in the 10-year was very, very interesting. So I'm just looking at my notes here on yesterday, economic things that came out. You know, we had the mortgage apps were down. We knew that was going to be the case. Home sales were down. We're down 2%. Everything is down in housing. That's where the disaster is. On Thursday, we're going to get claims, 213 continuing claims at 1.37 million. The big number is GDP coming in down minus 0.6. Forgot to look at the deflator, and maybe that'll come in a little less, and then they'll be able to start to play out the story of the potential of, you know, the inflation peaking again. Maybe they'll be able to throw that around. And I thought the algos were all over this thing on the BOE yesterday, and they just continued to bid the market throughout the session once we got some good traction. There was a couple areas that I'll talk to you about here in a few minutes that were active, but now, we've got a giant reversal here. And I don't know that it's a significant reversal, but it could be enough for setting up a little minor low here. And I think it's a very interesting pattern. I'm just looking at my notes. I don't have a lot of them other than really the reversal also in the 10-year. There was an outside bar in the Dow. That's really it, folks. There's not a lot to talk about here other than another little maybe conspiracy theory to start is that, like I said, the BOE is that a proxy for the pivot for the Fed? And, you know, who's next? Is there something? Japan's not really playing in the same place where the other central banks are. So I think this was a really interesting situation. I know there was a lot of issues going on, but what a perfect deal. The Fed did nothing. Mester is talking tomorrow, and she's been kind of more of a hawk, like raise rates really quick. She'd probably in my camp, they should have raised them 1.5 last week and just got it over with. But it's interesting that this pivot here in the UK, I think this is potentially I would say a substantial event. And we'll just have to see how it can play out, whether they can get any material traction or anything like that. So let's just get through the video tonight pretty quick. And those of you in the live room tomorrow, I'll be there at 1 o'clock as usual. So we'll cover some of this after we see some action tomorrow. And then tomorrow night will be the final video for the week. And we've got PCE coming out on Friday. So they may be able to get some traction on the deflator, PCE, maybe start to play out this inflation number coming under control. It's going to get interesting the next couple of days. And there's some definite, you'll see here in a minute in the technicals, there's some definite heavy resistance overhead that has to be dealt with. So let's go ahead and get into the database here. So we actually got some buy signals, believe it or not, on that little reversal. We got 356 buys, 65 sells. We moved up from 6 and change to 7.68% bullish, nothing material. But we did see some stocks starting to reverse here and symbols starting to come back in. And I think that's going to be interesting. And it's not material here. Let me just get into this just for a second. Really, as we look at the database, there's nothing material here. We've got the next numbers and metrics to watch for if we do get this 3-day, 5-day trade that I'm going to discuss here in a minute. Is if we get that, then maybe we can push this up back to 12, 15%. The next metric on the database to watch for is between 18 and 22%. Typically, when the market gets this overdone on the downside, we'll see some buys coming in, and that's what it would look like. We'd come up to those percentages. But for right now, definitely a big time reversal. So let's get into the technicals and cover that. So as we look at the S&P, we did get that giant reversal. We got an outside reversal, and we've already seen a big reversal on the PPMs on PPM 1 and 2. So they've reacted. We are seeing it starting to turn up a little bit, and it was definitely coming in here. And we've got resistance though right overhead, and this is going to be the numbers to watch for today on Thursday when we come in. R2 is 37.83. The 10-period moving average is 37.75. So somewhere between 75 and 83. If we did print up there, that would be a pretty big rally. That's 50 handles. If we got up there, that's exactly where we'd want to do it. The setup though, so I always talk about this pattern, and I told you folks I was going to do a video on this 3-day trade. I wish I had it out there. I've just been really busy lately to get that done, but it needs to be out there because basically when you get an outside reversal, especially at a key low, this was at the 52-week low that was printed. Now the futures got a outside reversal, the cash markets didn't. And sometimes that's a little bit of a divergence. It's always better when all the markets related get the outside reversal. Yesterday was the low in the cash. Today was the low in the futures. But the pattern's there. And so what we should see, two things have to happen. The high yesterday on Wednesday was 51. The high so far right now is 36. We have to make a higher high on Thursday than we did today. So it's got to print over 51, and 56 is R1. So we could print R1 minimum. S1 is 37.07. We're down to 21. You could get an opportunity to buy anywhere around S1. That's going to be good. Typically, if you'll remember, we had one of these patterns set up and it failed. And this is the same scenario: is will this reversal actually hold? And typically, this looks more significant, especially with the PPMs turning up like they did. So there's definitely some traction here. It just got to follow through. And ultimately, I think we're going to be limited if we do get a rally toward the 21-day moving average, and that number is coming down about 12 handles per day. It's at 38.88, so probably going to be 38.40 if we were to take a minute and look at maybe some of the retracement values on a Fibonacci. That probably map out fairly good to a retracement value. I'll do that tomorrow night if we get the confirmation. No reason to talk about it right now. So the trade sets up, you buy a lower opening. It's actually lower right now. You buy the lower opening, and two things have to happen. We have to take out 51, so we got to print at least R1, and we have to close higher than we did today. If we close lower, the trade's over. If we don't make a new high over there, over 51, the trade's over. You're out, and you cannot make a new low in this pattern. Obviously, it's an upward reversal pattern. So we'll track that for a few days. Let's see if we get confirmation at what's going on there. But this could end up to be pretty substantial, and maybe this has something to do with all of those puts that are expiring, right? So we'll see how all this plays out. And one of the, I won't cover it tonight, but one of the things that was interesting is the pressure that was in on Apple. Today's S&P was up 1.97, NASDAQ up 2.05, and Russell up 3.15. And that was in spite of Apple being down 1.57. So if Apple were up, we might have had a good solid 3.5%. It would have been a much bigger day. And so we'll see how it all sets up over the next couple of days. I think just everything that's going on right now. I did see somebody pointed out, I think it was in our live room, someone pointed out that Apple is starting to shift a bunch of its production over towards India now. And so that's going to be interesting. They're diversifying between China and India. So so anyway, let's go ahead, take a look at the weekly chart just real quick, because there were some things that came out of this. The market grid is 3771, so there's another number. You know, I love those clustered numbers. So 3770 is pretty big number for us to get through. I don't think that happens tomorrow. That would be an R2 print on the daily. It's R1 on the weekly. The next level above that, and this actually does map out good, is that the R2 on a weekly is 38.41. That would be probably that retracement that would play out this 3 to 5 day trade that I'm just talking about here. So the whole pattern, we're still negative. There's still downtrends going on in these markets. There's not been a major turn or anything like that. These are just short-term technicals that could last for 2 to 3 days if the metrics will hold up, and I'll cover that. We'll follow through that over the next several days until the trade fails. So that's the setup. And I've told you folks before, I always do that trade because it's interesting. It's not a high percentage trade. Doesn't mean like every time you get one it works, but when it works really, really well. And we did get part of the trade to work for the fourth day. So I'll just set that up as we go through it. Typically, if you get the 3 higher highs on the fourth day, it makes a new high. You sell and you're out. So we'll set it up. I'll follow through with that. But like I said, this isn't necessarily a major low, but sometimes they can end up to be a major low. I don't know why we'd set one up, but if the BOJ is the front man for the Fed and they're willing to do some crazy stuff, maybe what we saw today was just the beginning. And if that's the case, then there might be even more actions that the algos and everybody's going to be able to play off of. And especially, you watch closely, watch the 10-year. I'll cover that here in just a minute. So next we'll take a look at the NASDAQ. NASDAQ was able to, it got below the 200-week moving average. That's at 11,265. We're back above it. So it's struggling to just stay above that line. That line is a rising, the angle of attack is at 0.19, which is pretty impressive for a 200-week moving average. So that's going to continue to act as support. And possibly what we get into here, folks, is a sandwich between the 11,265 and the, we'll call it the 10-week, because that's going to be coming down pretty good. That will be your top end. So we could go from the 11,002, I'm just rounding off 250, to maybe toward the 12,000 level, and that would be a consolidation range that maybe sets up. As I've talked about before, these markets could very easily just go into a sideways range, and all of a sudden, even the scenario I was talking about in the last couple of days, where we get this rebalancing, quarterly rebalancing, we still have maybe that out there, but I think everything got disrupted today, or maybe it was camouflaged today in the rally that we saw based on what was going on with the BOE. So maybe a lot of folks had an opportunity to actually rebalance a whole lot of stuff today. So, you know, the other thing, I just mentioned this real quick that happened, is the VIX got to like 32. And I talked about that last night. The old scenario is sell 31, buy 20. Well, we got up to about 32 and it's at 30 yet, but it's starting to come off. And it will take just a few days for that to come back in. So I think there's a lot of things kind of pointing to at least a short-term bottom, 3-day, maybe as many as 5. Doesn't look material. That can change right now, but we definitely have something going. And the pattern that I talked to you about last night, just to mention again, we came in weaker, we rallied. Right now, the NASDAQ's down 46 handles on the futures. So we're weaker, and they come in on a rally. So those of you that are watching this and you're watching the London Open, see how the London opens after all the craziness that happened yesterday with the BOE, and just watch that to see how if there's any correlation to this story and these events that are happening. Let's go take a quick look here at the daily on the NASDAQ. The 10-period moving average, 11,624. We've been up to 11,567. That number, the interesting thing is here is that PPM1 has actually went through its first, second derivative. So that has the potential to maybe penetrate the 10 on a closing basis. That would be a close over 11,624. That would be moving above R1. R2 is 11,737. So that would be your high water mark for today on Thursday. And low is 11,470. So we're getting pretty close to that number right as we speak right now. So this is getting toward possibility of the extreme for overnight and setting up this lower opening with a rally. Like I said, everything could fail. The BOE could come out and do more stupid things, and it's a possibility for, I guess, the for this thing just to come apart at the seams and the reversal fail and all that. So that is going to be, I think, interesting to watch how the market trades for on Thursday. Next, taking a look at RTY. We're right at that number, the 10-period moving average 1736, the high 24, last is at 16. So we've got a little, like a slight downward pressure here. Right now, the S&P futures down 0.29, down 0.26, and then the NASDAQ is down 0.38. So like I said, we're trading potentially toward the bottom end of where today's lows should come in. And I would be very sensitive, by the way, I just want to put this out there, be very sensitive to S1. And if that's taken out, then we're going to go, S2 is a big number. So look at all the PPM, all of the market grid numbers. Those of you who have the indicators, make sure you check those numbers and look for how, if the market gets through S1, that we could go to S2. But what that could actually signal that if we go through S1, we may not be able to make a higher high on that S&P or the NASDAQ or any of these patterns, may not get confirmation for that 3-day trade. So that's going to be set up. Those of you in the live room tomorrow, we'll kind of cover that real time tomorrow. All right, next we'll cover the treasuries. And I think this was just a crazy day. This is the dailies. And we printed on the regular session yesterday that 399. I believe overnight we did print just a touch over 4%. And then we just got the reversal. And you can see we came in on the open was at 391. So it came in a little weaker. And then when the BOE came in, we hammered this thing down to 370, and we finished that right at the lows of the session. And we actually got a STX buy signal, so we should stabilize, go sideways for at least 1 to 2 days. But look at the PPMs all of a sudden. They were just soaring. All of a sudden, we've cracked first, second derivative on PPM 1 and 2. PPM 3 is down to its first derivative. And typically what that means is we get a challenge of the 10-period moving average. And right now that number's 364. I was mentioning some of these 360s and 340 numbers seem completely ridiculous to even bring up last night. But all of a sudden, here we are trading right into that range. And I think that this is probably a significant top here. I'm still going to go with the fact that I think maybe the BOE is running the front show for a pivot, and there might be something really big here. Like I said, we have to watch what these guys are doing. And even though the claim is that, this is all about the British markets and all of that, it's maybe not. I think it's related. Guarantee you that there were phone calls made to Powell and others here in the U.S. that there was some coordinated thing. I don't know if you saw some of Janet Yellen's comments. She's basically saying the financial markets, they're just fine. Everything is working fine. That woman has just went from being what was viewed when she was in the Fed to be reasonable and have a handle on things to a complete ideologue. She's just all in on everything that she's in on, and everybody that's within the current administration is in on it as well. And it's just Yeah, it's just a crazy scenario we're seeing. I mean, like she has no relevance or at all anymore. And I used to call her Grandma Yellen back in the day. And I think, I don't know what's going on there, but markets aren't functioning fine, especially the gilt market was definitely disrupted. But like I said, I think they're using this as an excuse to make the pivot. I mean, 30 basis points on the treasuries on the 10-year is a huge number, especially after what we've been seeing here and the so-called rhetoric that we got out of the Fed last week. And I saw something, I forget where I was, sometimes I'll visit some of these Twitter spaces, and somebody made a comment that they thought that what Powell said a couple of weeks ago was the most bearish, hawkish thing they've ever heard in their life from a Fed. So they haven't been around very long because I know Volcker was probably the craziest out there, and Greenspan had his moments as well, and certainly Jay Powell is not in that class, I don't think, as hawks go from that standpoint. And I'll tell you, a lot of people did not like Paul Volcker back in the day. He was not revered. It wasn't until the 90s when he became a Federal Reserve god, when it's just interesting how it goes. But he was absolutely hated back in the day when all that stuff was going on. He came in 79, 80, 81. So yeah, so this is interesting, I think, what we're seeing here, folks. So, and just expect for the unexpected to come from the unexpected place. Everybody knew what was going on with the pound, all of that. I get what they're doing, and everybody knows what's going on with all these currencies. I'm not going to cover the dollar tonight. Possibly the end of the week I'll cover it, but I'll just tell you there was an outside reversal. The dollar closes lower today than it has the inverse of what I talked about in the S&P, and that would make sense that those two markets would be trading in against each other or in the opposite directions. Let's take a real quick look before I move on at the weekly chart on the treasuries. So we got this big spike down. We did have, it's interesting, we had an RTX sell signal last week, and it didn't feel like we were going to get that sideways movement. So we closed at 369.70. All of a sudden, we're right at that number. We're at 370. We'll see. I looked at the overnight market on the treasuries, and they're about 375. So there's a slight uptick going on right now, about 5 basis points. But it's going to be interesting to see if this weekly comes back in and then just starts to go sideways for another week or so, where we start to see consolidation. As it stands right now, we have a reversal on a weekly on the yields, and how appropriate is that comes right after the comments from Powell and how they're going to continue to keep everything going, and then they got their buddies over in England fronting for them. So I think it's going to get even more interesting over the next couple of days. But I just want you to see that the PPMs are still very positive, but the support for this market, and this is what I was talking about last night, the support for the market is actually substantially below where we're at right now. So 370, I talked about this, 340, 360 range is where the major support's going to come in. So all of a sudden, we printed 370, we could be in that range in the next couple of days, and certainly next week. And I think this is going to set the tone, the sentiment for the equity markets, for everything here. So might be a little shift. Pay attention. I mentioned yesterday, those of you that are maybe holding shorts, you might want to watch out carefully for that. We'll see how Apple goes. Maybe tomorrow night, maybe I'll go in and cover a couple stocks and I usually don't, but it might be worth looking at because there's some things going on there as well. I think maybe the iPhone 14, I was going to make a joke the other day when the market was rallying, is that maybe the iPhone 14 was going to save the market. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case. But like I said, if Apple comes back in tomorrow, all of a sudden we've got other elements that could rotate this market more positive over the next day or two. Next, we'll go through the crude oil. Crude oil, it rebounded pretty substantially yesterday. We had a low of 76.25. We closed at 81, back to 82. That was my previous expected bottom, was the 82. If you recall, 82.92. All of a sudden, we got a reversal going here in crude, a little bit of a bid. Everything's pulling back because it was a bit of a crazy day yesterday on Wednesday. So everything's pulling back a little bit, but this is a weekly trend and a potential reversal. If we look at just the market grid here, 82.70 is just short of that. That's R2 for the week. So watch that number. If we get through 82.70, we could continue to print up towards R3, which would be 84.78. So it definitely looks like almost all these markets, including gold, everything made a flip-flop from where we were just a couple of days ago, and sentiment turned pretty quick. And so this is something to watch. Let's take a quick look at the dailies. Daily came right into this resistance between 81.84, 83.98. PPM1 is still negative, so there's still some downward pressure here. I was talking about this. There's a little formation that happens on the market grid. Let me blow this up a little bit just so you can see this. You'll see that it gets what I call kind of a bubble formation. Those tend to be where the lows set up. We still have downward pressure on PPM 1, 2, and 3. They're all down. And the next couple of days will help to dissipate some of that downward pressure and possibly set up a scenario where we could end up going back toward the 200-day moving average, which is 89.88. Originally, I thought we'd be the 40-week 200-day average, which is similar values that we would be back up there, and that would be where the market should stabilize. So it looks like we're trying to stabilize here. We got the bubble bottom. PPM's all turning up here across the board, 1, 2, and 3. And so we'll see what sets up here, but definitely some stability coming in from that standpoint. Take a look at gold. Gold got a big reversal yesterday. We traded all the way up to the 10-period moving average, just above it. That's at 1666.2. We actually were able to close above it. We're back a little lower tonight, where the low's been 1660. 62 last trade, 64 is the 10. It's still got some downward pressure, but for all practical purposes, it's flat now. We're down only 0.08, which tells you that there's a pretty substantial probability that we could continue to run up to around 1685, 1692 would be the range to look for here. And just flip over to the weekly. And the weekly's got a bit of a print reversal going. We're still very negative here on the trend. So the downtrend's still in place. It will take weeks for this thing to get in a position to actually put in a bottom. I was talking about the potential if we could go down as low as 1540. I've been talking about 1550, which is a ways away from where we are now. The market will bottom where it's bottoming. I just don't see at the moment. There's still work to be done before we'll be able to make a call at a low. All right, final market we'll look at is Bitcoin. Very interesting, folks. We keep bouncing off of that 18.5 level. This is the weekly so far this week, 18.492. We printed at 18.200, and we keep just rebounding off of there. The first resistance is at 21.2. We could easily bounce back in there. Last week's high was 1977. So far, we've had a 20,370. So we made a new high. And easily, if we get through this 20,370, then look for that move up to around 21.2, something like that. But here's the interesting thing that's going on here. This is the weekly chart. The PPM2 is trying to turn back up again. And if we're still down at 2.84. Like I said, we've got a lot of work to do, but if we continue to stay stable for a few more weeks, all of this downside is going to dissipate. And if there is, just going with the scenario I'm talking about in the equity markets and with the BOE, if there is a pivot going on that's being proxied by the Bank of England, maybe others to follow, by the way, they're going to be able to blame currency situations, whatever going on in their countries, and maybe you get a whole bunch of folks all of a sudden doing a intra meeting or between meeting action and continuing to affect market sentiment. And it doesn't have to be all the biggest banks in the world to do it. They just have to convince people that there's a shift coming. And like I said, they could play out this PCE numbers, the deflator coming out tomorrow. That could be something as well from that standpoint. So there's plenty that I guess the powers to be can kind of manipulate from here. I'll take a quick look at the daily and on Bitcoin. So somewhat interesting here, folks. And 2 sessions ago, we got some Fibonacci targets for 22, 23, and 25 on the daily. PPMs are trying to turn up again as well. These are actually bullish formations, especially with this consolidation here. And those of you who've been in the live room, you know this is what I call the caterpillar formation. It's just going zigzagging back and forth. These are volatility consolidations, and if we do start to break above the 21 period moving average and stay above there, we're right at it right now, 19.7. We can get back above there, then all of a sudden 20,500, and then easily we're going to get these potential moves to the upside. But 22 is going to be about it because there's lots of overhead resistance when it comes to the weekly charts on Bitcoin. Okay, folks, this is going to do it for tonight's video. Appreciate you watching. What I would like to just emphasize, and make sure you watch these metrics that I talked about on the equities. See if we get higher highs across the board on all of these indexes, and we have and close higher tomorrow. So I'll set it up tomorrow night if we get that. If we don't close higher tomorrow, that's going to be a bad sign. There could be an instant retest of the lows that we printed yesterday as far as that goes on Wednesday in the futures. My expectation is the opposite, is that we will probably get the confirmation, and we're going to have some numbers with GDP and some of these other numbers coming out that they're going to be able to potentially pump this market on. We'll see how it all plays out. Have a great day trading. Make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and if you haven't got the indicators, get them. They're amazing. We have some new stuff coming out, so I'm anxious. I'll be making an announcement pretty soon on a number of things. So get ahead of time so you can get the new version as well. All right, talk to you soon, folks.